Hi, it's Ian from the Postal Hub podcast.
And Marek from Last Mile Experts.
And we are the Last Mile Prophets. This is the last word on the last mile. This video is created thanks to Modern Expo, one of the key players in the world's parcel locker market. Modern Expo's product portfolio includes innovative solutions with refrigeration and freezing cells, Bluetooth locks, and even personal parcel lockers. Marek, we're going to give people a bit of a teaser, some new research from Last Mile Experts into the Polish CEP market. Very quickly, how would you characterise the Polish market, and why is it important for anyone outside of Poland to know about?
First of all, hello Ian, hello everybody. If I was to characterize it, I would use one word: lockerland. Poland is the biggest locker market in Europe. And later on, when we discuss some of the sort of high-level teaser elements of what's going to be coming out in the report, you'll see why that's so relevant.
When we mention lockers in Poland, there's one name that springs to mind, isn't there, Marek?
There is indeed. And the name is?
Marek Różycki. No, I was going to say InPost in terms of a company. So InPost has, what is it now? Is it 16,000 or 14,000 locks? I can't keep up.
At the last count, Ian, it was 18,000. If anyone's in doubt, you need to check the latest Last Mile Experts out-of-home report, which is also coming out soon. It's at least 18,000, if not more.
What does this mean for, so let's just get into a couple of highlights from the report then. We've talked about InPost. What have you found with regard to who are the leaders in the market and things like that?
So first of all, maybe the top three elements that I'm going to share for now, not more because you won't get excited when you read the report later. But the top three things are the market's grown by over 11%, which is not bad considering that, the COVID boom already been there. We've got various other challenges and so on. Remember, this is data up until the end, if I remember correctly, of last year. So it's already a couple of months old, but it's grown by over 11% again. The leader has distanced himself, or have distanced themselves. Is it themselves or
itself?
Okay, from the rest of the pack, and really have done that because they're almost twice as big as the next player. And basically, what's happened is InPost has been taking shares from everybody, and it's not such a dramatic change as you'd have had a couple of years ago, but still, step by step, it's getting bigger. And the final piece of really big news is, this one doesn't surprise me, that B2C is now more than 3/4 of the market. And there was one other thing, I'm going to be really nice and I'll share one other thing if I can find it, which is, this is really interesting. In 2019, door-to-door deliveries were about 70% of the market. 2022, guess what? Or maybe I should leave that as a bit of a teaser. Should I leave it as a teaser?
You have to read the report to find out, I suppose.
Yeah, read the report to find out, but you'll see a dramatic change. So that will support the Lockerland argument.
You mentioned earlier about the growth in the actual volume of parcels. I think, did you say 19% or 11%? What was it?
11%.
11%. So that's a growth in actual parcel volumes, is that right? So this is despite the end of COVID. So it's still growing 11% overall, the parcels market.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, that if you look at the value, the growth has been even higher. But again, when someone reads the report, they can see that. But I think, remember, Poland is robust. There's a lot that's been happening, Ian, because you've had Amazon entry recently, Shopee entry, you've got Allegro, you've got Kainiao. Everybody who is anybody is there right now. So I think there has been that effect.
A couple of years ago, we did a webinar with InPost talking about all kinds of things relating to parcel lockers. And they talked about, Raphael, the CEO, talked about lockers as a preference for delivery options. Is that what's driving part of the growth of InPost and the growth of out-of-home in Poland? Is this just the acceptance and desire even for out-of-home delivery?
Yes, Ian. If you remember, the Net Promoter Score then, when we had the webinar, for the first time in history, was higher for locker delivery compared to door-to-door home delivery. NPS, for anyone who hasn't come across that, is basically a measure that says, would I recommend to my friends and others, and so on and so on. So it's a pretty good measure of how popular that particular method is. And so, I think it's only gone more and more in favor of lockers since then. Because there's even more of them. I mean, if you can imagine a country with, I think, officially 38, but probably 36 million Poles and probably 3 million Ukrainians right now, you've got 20,000 machines, InPost 18,000, plus everyone else is trying to elbow in with their own machines, plus a similar number, if not more, of of PUDOs. It means basically it is really, to coin my favorite Belgian Post phrase, slipper distance. It really is slipper distance to your nearest access point or locker. One thing that was really interesting, and if people, when they read the report, they'll see, I'm a little bit surprised that C2C has not grown as much as I'd have expected. It's not falling, but when I talk to my colleagues from Western Europe, they say, companies like Vinted, they're just going through the roof. And this is interesting. And I think what's going to be very, very cool is to observe what happens next year, because I think that's going to be more important. Plus, the other one that hasn't yet had an impact is we've got 3 million Ukrainian people in Poland. And what is that going to mean? I think it's going to mean more use of out of home, because when you don't have a permanent residence address and you're working at various times, or you're not available, or you have a language issue, it's much easier to go to a machine where you have an app and you just press a button. It's going to be really, really interesting, I think, Ian.
I want to dive into this, not dive into, but just go back to this idea of the C2C marketplaces, the likes of Vinted and others. I mean, Vinted's even launched its own logistics network, hasn't it? So that's probably a little parentheses there. Let's not go into that. But this is possibly could be a real growth market. Will C2C fit in nicely with an out-of-home delivery model? I mean, is there any conflict there, or is it just going to work fine?
I think actually C2C works very, very well when you have high percentages of out-of-home and you have high accessibility to out-of-home infrastructure. So who have we got? We've got, of course, Vinted. We've got Allegro, who have their own, it's called Allegro Local. You've got OLX, which is an Asper's company. You've got eBay, you'd still do a little bit, but basically everybody who's anyone in, I would say, Second Life or C2C type businesses there. And you've got the right infrastructure. So I think it is going to grow. As we said earlier, because of the number of people from Ukraine, I think it's going to also grow, because of the convenience of out of home, but also a lot of these people have come to Poland with nothing, and Second Life products may be valuable. Watch this space. Our current research and trends have basically said that it's of course, if I remember correctly, let me have a look. I'm going to snippet of information. Let's give you a snippet. I think it's around about 7% at the moment. Now, we haven't forecast it to grow too much, but I reckon that because when this report was produced, we still didn't have the Ukrainian crisis, but I actually think it's going to grow more than we'd planned. So, watch this space. It's really quite interesting. And remember, Vinted, who have started their own last mile infrastructure, come from, guess where? Do you know this?
Estonia, like everybody else.
Pretty good guess, from Lithuania, which is right next door to Poland. So it's going to be very, very interesting to observe what happens. From my perspective, Poland must be a market in which Vinted will want to perform well. And as I said, you've got all these other players there. So interesting, supportive of out of home, supportive of last mile development generally. The only thing we didn't mention, Ian, and this is something we alluded to in the report, and let's see what happens. At the moment, we've got a bit of political turmoil, but when things calm down, will governments and local authorities start looking at the last mile more? Because, Ian, I think this is a really big deal. Pollution issues, unfortunately, our government has just promoted using coal, subsidising it as the only form that's now being subsidised of energy. Really great. But will that change, and will we find that actually the government's going to start saying, hold on a minute, we need to start being more efficient, which will promote out of home? And on the other hand, will carriers, with fuel prices at sort of more or less double what they were, will they start saying, hold on, we cannot have a guy delivering 1.2 parcels per stop when an InPost courier can do 10, 20, 30 or more times that?
I think that's a hugely relevant question, not just for Poland, but for every market. Perhaps not with the same emphasis on coal, but with regards to vehicles on the road, emissions, congestion, all of that. Something I've been covering on the Post Hub podcast a bit this year for my dedicated listeners. Marek, we've run out of time. People who want to find out more about this report, where will it be available?
So the report will be available, of course, on Last Mile Experts website, which is www.lastmileexperts.com. We'll promote it on LinkedIn. ETA at the moment, the report's done. It's just now making it nice and doing all the graphics. I reckon it's going to be probably in about a month's time, because we've got August and everyone's on holiday in Poland too. But let's think around about end of August, early September.
We'll stick a link in somewhere below this video. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. Remember to hit like, subscribe, and the notifications button so you get a notification every time we publish a new video on the Last Mile Profits channel. Thank you for being a subscriber. We really appreciate your support. Well, if you have already subscribed, thank you for being a subscriber. If you haven't yet, here's a thanks in advance. Anyway, an anticipated thank you. Marek Różycki, thanks for being part of the Last Mile Profits today.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody.